slide is on the growth assessment. So the growth process really, and when the previous slide we talk about that, the difference between an evaluation and an assessment. It's very important to understand this. Assessment is looking for your feedback in the growth process. So you've probably all done your growth goals, submitted them to your principal. I know some people want them by September the 30th. I've always said by the end of October would be great. And we're going to talk about the 4 standards of professional practice. And this comes from Charlotte Danielson's book. I don't know if you have a copy of it, but if you've gone to UNB, you probably have seen a copy of that, Danielson's assessments. And we're going to talk about the walkthroughs and the formal classroom visits and the summative assessment. So the very first thing is to talk about teacher performance assessment. And these are the 4 domains. And when you look at Charlotte Danielson's book, or you look at your summative assessment, these are the 4 areas that it's based on: planning and preparation, classroom environment, instruction, and professional responsibility. The purpose of the teacher performance assessment is to use standards of professional practice. All right. This is accomplished through regular walkthroughs and professional conversations. I'm a big believer in the professional conversation. It gets to know you and what you're looking for. And so when I'm talking today, this is from my perspective. This is, every principal might do this a little differently. So I'm going to emphasize that. So the teacher performance assessment should reflect input from both teacher and administrator or administrators based on the multiple evidence. So collecting the evidence is through the walkthroughs and having those conversations. So, and when we talk about the walkthroughs, it's usually a minimum of 4 regular walkthroughs, and the walkthroughs last usually a minimum of 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. And some principals will get feedback right away. Some will just leave a sticky note. That is totally up to. So the intent and the purpose of this is a growth process. This is not a judgment. It's very important to know that. So we look at this, and they use the word growth again. And this little diagram really illustrates what the expectations are for instruction. Then we're going to break that down, and we'll talk about each one. So for example, planning and preparation, standard of practice, know the curriculum, the evidence of New Brunswick curriculum in what you're teaching. All right. It's very important to have the resources to back up what you're teaching and know that you know very familiar with the curriculum and the outcomes. And this should be shown for your lesson plan, evidence of formative and summative assessment practices. Students are aware of their learning goals. Learning is reflective of student needs. So when we do a walkthrough, this is one of the first sections that we usually look at. And when I do my walkthroughs, I try not to look beyond maybe one domain and maybe a little bit in the second domain. So there's 3 main domains that I look at when I do a walkthrough. So planning and preparation is the first one. The next one is classroom environment. All right, is it an inclusive learning environment? Positive attitude, routines and transitions, I always find very important. It's very interesting to see how students move from one activity to the next, and it takes a lot of practice to do that, and even proactive strategies. So in this here, we're looking, when you look at that classroom environment, we're looking probably at that tier 1 interventions of what you're doing for behavior, like for example, proximity, right? Your tone of your voice and how you're talking. So evidence of physical and social emotional safety. Do the kids feel like they're comfortable in the room? And connectiveness to students, knowing them by names, and just greeting them. And so instruction, standard of practice, communications. So this is how you're instructing, facilitates purposeful discussions and activities, provides appropriate wait time, lessons and activities are relevant and engage students, and there's a variety of assessment practices. and also that timely feedback, those things. So when I do a walkthrough, I usually pick one area that I'm looking at. So maybe the first time I go in, I will take a look at classroom environment, all right, and look at routines, transitions, and maybe try to catch it when you're moving, maybe from a reading circle or sharing circle to a writing activity, or a writing activity to moving over to, I know we're not supposed to use guided reading anymore, but if you're doing an assessment in that aspect for 3 to 5, you're still allowed to use guided reading. But we won't get into that today. So in the last area, the last domain is professional responsibility standard of practice. So it's really about that communication is appropriate, tactful, and positive, informs parents of students' progress. You know, teachers sometimes will keep logs on parent contacts, what the expectations are, and how you collaborate with colleagues. Even though that's on your walkthrough sheet, we usually don't collect that data right there. We collect that data through conversations and with the teacher themselves. And so we can, we know what you signed up for. As a young teacher, I would suggest just doing what you can professionally. What are you getting involved with? How many committees and whatever? Just pick one thing maybe and do it, and let it grow from there. But trying to, when you get on a staff or you get into a school, trying to do more than one is usually, it takes away from other times, your valuable time on other activities that you should be doing. So a teacher performance assessment is a combination of those observations, informal and formal, products and conversations that support professional growth using the standards of practice for teachers. So really, it comes down to that Danielson's aspect of what you're showing for evidence. The assessment must be completed by the administrator, and the observations and feedback from the other professionals may be considered. So, for example, I will send out the form. I think, did I stop sharing? Yes, I did. So I'll send out the form, the ASDW standard of practice form. Can you see that on your screen? Give me a thumbs up or, yeah. So I couldn't hear you. Can't see that. Okay. Can you see that right there? Thumbs up, somebody? Yes. Okay. So this is your form, and this should be your informal walkthroughs, this section right here, and the dates and times of your informal walkthroughs. There should be pre-observations, conference, and we should be taught discussions after walkthroughs, and that can be via email or just a short, brief discussion, catching somebody in the hallway or at your prep. It shouldn't be very long. After a 10-minute walkthrough, you shouldn't spend 20 minutes talking about a 10-minute walkthrough, but you should have some sort of feedback in that. The former observation, it should be doing 2 of them. You should set up a time. I did one this morning. I did a formal observation, went in and viewed a math lesson in a kindergarten class. It was approximately 45 minutes. Variety of different things. It was probably about 50 minutes this morning. And we picked a time. I emphasized, what do you want to work on? What do you want to show me? And we had the pre-conversation probably a week ago. Said, I want you to come in Thursday morning if that fits your schedule at 9:30. Come in and see a math lesson that I want to teach. And I usually try to work from people's strengths. And what do they want to show me? And like I said, this is how I do it. And so really, when you look at that, you should be looking at steps in completing this. So once this data is collected with the walkthroughs and with the former observations, so that was my first one. I'll do another one here in the next few weeks. and we'll do 2 observations. I've already done the minimum of 4 walkthroughs. We do probably between 5 and 10, and the former observations. Once I'm done both of those, we'll have a discussion. I'll share this form with my with the teacher I'm doing it on. She will do the self-rating, and I'll do the administrative rating. We also both have supporting evidence. So for example, the first domain, planning and preparation, the teacher will list out what her supporting evidence is for that area and the next steps for growth. So that should tie into that. So yeah. So I'm going to go back here just a little ways. So the observation must be completed by both the teacher and the administrator. All right. And the frequency D contracts, you're done yearly. New B teachers, you're observed one more time within the first 3 years. That's a probationary period. I think with our new collective agreement, that's going to be 1 year. And ongoing B teachers should be done once every 5 years. So the ratings, this is an important area too, in the ratings. Self-ratings, and we've changed this. So for example, if you've had one done 3 years ago, maybe, for example, it was much different than this. So it gives you VE, very evident, mostly evident, somewhat evident, not evident at all. So, and we both fill it out, then we come to a collaborative rating. And so once you've completed that, at the bottom of your form, you should be able to see I just wanted to show you at the bottom of the form, this one here. Teacher signature, administrator signs, and whether you recommend it for the teacher. And really take the time at the end of the form, after the last domain, and you have an opportunity to write some additional information or your teacher's comments at the bottom. All right. I know I talked fairly fast. It was 16 minutes. And I thank you for joining. Now I'm going to ask if there's any questions. Does anybody have any questions? In the chat. Like I said, every principal does this a little differently. This is what the expectations are here. And I never really touched too much on it, but your growth goal is very important. Your growth goal should be part of your assessment too. And you should have that opportunity to review your growth goal with your administrator, one of them. Any questions on anything? Yes, somebody just told me to turn my volume up. Did you hear me at all? Or did I just talk? Sorry. I realized that. Thank you, Stephanie. What is your biggest advice? My biggest advice is having those professional conversations, and do not get offended when somebody's. The biggest thing here is that as teachers, we're the hardest people on ourselves, and we look at, when I seen when it came out that it said evaluation or teacher evaluation, even this says that it shouldn't say teacher evaluation. It should say teacher assessment. It's a professional assessment. Don't look at it as judgment. Look at it as growth, and look at it as a process. Where you are right now does not mean where you're going to be in June, and where you are right now is not going to be where you are in 3 years. You got to look at it the same way you look at your kids. It's about a growth process. And I guess, Lindsay, that would be my my biggest thing right there would be that it's a growth process. It's not an evaluation. Evaluation is sometimes and when you see the word summative, yeah, sometimes it can be, and that's what it was called years ago, was a summative evaluation. Now it's called a teacher performance assessment, standards of practice. So they've taken that out of there, and as administrators, we should take that out of there as a judgment. It's not a judgment position. So, and the way I would do things is going to be, and that's the other thing to keep in mind, every administrator is going to look at things differently. And I look at things as a growth process.